Hi, this is Jack Spirico with another survival podcast video. Today what we're going to do is we're going to teach you how to make a 3-part composting bin system. And we're going to do that with some Rubbermaid garbage cans. I actually have a couple of them made up here. I'm going to make the last one in the 3-part system today on the video. But before we get started with how to do it, which is really pretty easy, you're going to find out that if maybe you're a new person to tools, if you're not big on doing projects on your own, this is going to be a great first project, give you some confidence in using tools, because this is a very, very simple, very easy project to do. You can probably knock this out in an hour or less if you just go at it and do it, even if you've never built anything before, as long as you have the tools that you need. So let's start out with the tools that you're going to need to be able to accomplish this project. First and foremost, you're going to need a drill for this project. Now, you probably could get by cutting stuff with an X-Acto knife or something, or a saw, but really a drill's the way to go. This is an 18-volt cordless DeWalt. I'm not big on like one tool over another, except when it comes to drills. If you're going to buy a rechargeable drill, go with a DeWalt. There's DeWalt, and then there's everything else. I've had this drill a very long time. You can see how faded it is. Absolutely the best piece of power tool equipment you can buy when it comes to drills and anything similar is a DeWalt. Alright, next you're going to need a hacksaw. Pretty simple little tool. Get them for about 10 to 12 bucks. Absolutely you're going to need this tool to be able to pull this off. Next tool you're going to need is a hole saw. Now, what I wanted to be able to do with this project is I wanted to be able to core a hole big enough for a 1/2-inch piece of pipe to fit in. Not necessarily really tight, but somewhat snug. A good consistent fit. So you would think that I have a 1/2-inch hole saw here. Actually, I have a 7/8-inch hole saw. Why is that? Because when you buy PVC pipe and you get 1/2-inch pipe, the little centerpiece is what's a 1/2 inch. The outside diameter is quite a bit larger. A 7/8 will work. A 1-inch will work. It'll be a little bit loose, but it'll be fine for this project. Anything smaller than a 7/8, this pipe is not going to fit in there. So you are going to need a 7/8 to 1-inch hole saw. You go like 1 1/4, it's a little bit too big. You're really better off with a 7/8 to 1-inch. You are also going to need a standard, typical drill bit. This one is 5/16, so you could use a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. When you see what we use this for, you'll see why it's not that imperative what size this drill bit is. You're going to need something to make a mark with. You could probably get by with a lot of different things, but this is a Sharpie. It's what I recommend. I really don't care what color you use, but a Sharpie. And that's it for the tools. Now, what are you going to need for your building materials? Well, let's put this aside for a second. One thing you're going to need is some 1/2-inch pipe. Now, this piece of pipe's already cut pretty much to the length that we're going to use it at. I bought a 5-foot piece of pre-cut 1/2-inch pipe just because I didn't have to worry about it fitting in the back of my truck, but any piece of 1/2-inch PVC pipe will work. You're going to need some of this. This is 4-inch pre-drilled drainage pipe. It's kind of got a PVC on the outside, but it's more like a rubber on the inside. This stuff is cheap. It comes in 10-foot segments, and the nice thing is a 10-foot segment is going to give you just about exactly what you need to make a 3-part system. You could probably stretch it, and I'll show you that as I'm putting it together, to make a 4-part system if you wanted to. Why pre-drilled? Well, 1, because it comes that way, and 2, it's going to save you time. We are going to drill some additional holes on the back side, but all of these 5/8-inch holes are going to save us some time when we get into building, so you'll need that. You'll also need at least 1, if not 3, and for a 3-part system you'll need 3 32-gallon trash cans. Now, why did we go with 32 gallons? We could have went with a big trash can. We could have done 75-gallon systems. Why did we go with the smaller trash can? 1, because we're doing a 3-part system, and with a 3-part system, this is going to help most households deal with every bit of their organic waste, even if you're getting some additional things from your ground clippings or from friends or from a produce section. It's going to be more than most people can really use with a 3-part system. 2, I wanted to solve one of the problems, what I'll talk about here in a second, but one of them was, you know, if you want your compost to break down quickly, you need to be turning it, rotating it, shoveling it often. I wanted you to be able to just pick the bin up, dump the compost into another bin. Now, if you go with anything much bigger than 32 gallons, you're going to find it difficult for one person, possibly difficult for 2 people when it's near full, to pick it up and dump it into the next container. So that's part of why we went with this. These are, what are these? These are Mighty Tough 32-gallon trash cans. We bought these at Lowe's. They were about 12 something, call them 13 bucks a piece. I believe that that's about as cheap as you want to go. I did see some for $8. They didn't look like they would have stood up to the UV rays very well. You could go with a much higher quality garbage can if you want to, but I think this will take care of things for most people. And the nice thing is everything that I've just shown you, not counting the tools, can all be purchased for under about $60. So we're going to be able to show you here how to make a really good system for a very low investment and just a little bit of your time. We'll go ahead on to phase 2 in just a second. Okay, before we go ahead and show you how to actually build the composting system, I wanted to explain to you a little bit more about what composting is, how it works, and why we built the system the way that we did. Composting is pretty simple. It's simply taking any kind of organic matter and stacking it up so that nature will take its course and it will break down, and between bacteria and fungi and insects, it will break down. Now, to get that to happen, there's a few things that you need to do. One that's really important is to cut your initial material up as small as possible. So it's going to make a lot of sense as you're putting your material into your bin. If it's like a bunch of leaves, run it over a couple times with the lawnmower. 2 is creating a variety, kind of a system of layers that aren't really layers like straight layers, but making sure that you're not putting in, this much grass clippings in one shot before you add something else. It's mixing it together. The next thing is airflow, and before I talk about airflow, let's talk about this. So what are we going to do with coffee? Well, we drink coffee in the morning, but really what I have this container here, this represents one of the garbage cans. And I wanted to explain to you why the modifications I'm going to teach you today are necessary to get your compost not only to break down, but to break down quickly and properly. If we say this is the garbage can and we took the lid off and we just threw garbage in there and put the lid on and we let that sit out, what it's going to do is it's going to stink. It's going to break down very slowly. It's going to break down what's called anaerobically, which means in absence of oxygen. It's going to rot, and it's not going to produce very good compost. It's going to take a very long time and become a very stinky eyesore with a bunch of flies trying to figure out how to get into it while it's in your backyard. So there's a couple things that we need to do. One, we need to allow soil organisms to come up out of the soil and get into the container. So the first thing that I'm going to have you do when we start working with our garbage bins is cut holes in the bottom of the container. 2, we're going to need to establish airflow. To establish airflow, we're going to put a series of holes around the bottom, a series of holes around the top. Then we're going to use that big piece of pipe I showed you to put a piece of pipe down the middle with aeration, and we're going to put a little piece of pipe in the bottom. That's going to create a breathing system. And that's pretty much all that we're going to do. But if you think about the way composting works, what we're going to do is turbocharge the composting process with some very simple modifications. As you compost things, the internal piece of the composting, all this organic matter, actually heats up. It'll heat up to about 160 degrees or even more. As you get all that heat heating up and you have a nice channeled pipe coming up to the top, what happens to heat? It rises. As it's rising, it's going to pull air through the bottom and expel the air out the top, and that's going to accelerate the composting process. The next problem I found with most composting bins is they actually had no bottom whatsoever. That allowed all the compost to be exposed to the ground. That was good because the soil creatures could get in, but you had 2 choices. Either you just kept the compost in here a really long time until it was all broken down, which isn't that big a deal if you put all your compost in at once, but since we're in residential situations, you're using your garden, your kitchen waste, things like that, you're adding to it on, over a long period of time. It might take you 2 to 3 months to fill one of these bins completely to the top as it's breaking down. So you have material at all different parts of the process. So you really need to do something like put all the material from this bin into a second bin and then into a third bin. That's why we did a 3-part system. Well, the problem with nothing on the bottom was if you picked it up, then you had to shovel everything. Well, I'm kind of lazy and I don't want to shovel, so I wanted to create a system where you take one bin, dump it into the second bin. That's why we went with holes in the bottom. The reason we don't make any holes in the lid, and you'll see how that works as we do the assembly process, is you want to keep your compost moist but not soaked. Well, if we put holes at the top, we allow rainwater to get in through the top and we allow evaporation. So when it's really rainy, it gets too wet, and when it's really dry out, it dries out too fast. So that's why we go with holes around the side. And with that, we'll go ahead and show you how to actually put the system together. So step 1's pretty simple. All we have to do is we have to make a way for both air and for soil creatures to get into our compost bin, which again is going to be our mighty tough 32-gallon Rubbermaid trash can. We're going to do that with our hole saw and our drill. And if we can focus the camera in here, this is really not critical. None of this stuff's very critical. But you'll see that there's little sections here to the garbage can. And I'm going to use those as a guideline. I'm going to put one hole in the center, and I'm going to put one hole in each one of these sections, and then one hole here and here, and that's going to give me a pretty uniform series of holes. And there ain't nothing really complicated about doing this, folks. Simply drill the hole and knock out your sections. And I've made a mistake. I'm going to have the camera woman hold on for me for a second here. Little tip I picked up. Take one of your garbage can lids, and you can use it to dump off all your little pieces that come out of your hole saw. Now you can actually use your hole saw once or twice before it's necessary to get them out. I've actually found if you leave one, it usually makes getting that second one out a lot easier. But all we're looking for is a uniform source of air, and we want to create access points for our soil organisms. And that's what we're looking for right there. It's just a series of holes in the bottom of the bin. Real simple, real easy to do. Now, the next thing we need to understand is that this is going to be sitting flat on the ground, so that's great for worms and all other little kinds of creatures to get up into our compost bin and help us break things down. But we're not going to get a lot of airflow from this. So what we need to do now is we need to put a series of holes along the bottom. Now, going with a 7/8 inch hole, that's going to let you put a lot of material in there. You're not going to have a lot of it fall out. A little might fall out, but no big deal. Again, I'm going to use my raised portions of my garbage can for a guideline. I'm going to do one in each raised portion, one in each center. This is really not that important, folks. You can pretty much do it however you want. You just want some kind of a uniform pattern. And I'll just go through and cut all these holes. Now you'll notice as I did this, I did absolutely no measuring whatsoever. I did everything by eye. One thing I did do was try to make the holes about the same distance from the bottom. And one thing you're going to want to look out for is if there's any type of obstruction in the bottom that's going to prevent you from being able to insert a pipe, and I'll show you what I mean by that. You're going to want to make sure the holes are high enough you can insert a piece of your 1/2 inch pipe levelly throughout, levelly, I don't know if that's a word, but fairly level throughout the bottom of the bin, because that's going to be important in the next step. So we've got that done. So now we've got our bottom, we've got holes in the sides, we've got holes in the bottom, we've got good airflow. The next thing we need to do is make a way for the air to get out the top so we can get a good airflow through. And I'm pretty much going to do the same thing. This is going to be boring, so we'll fast forward through it a little bit, but I'm going to pretty much take every raised portion and every indented portion and make a piece. And I want to go just about 1 inch from the top all the way around. And again, you don't have to measure this, but if you go a fairly uniform distance by eye, it'll just look better, if that's important to you. We'll probably remove our labels once the project's complete. I left them on there mainly so you guys can see what I bought. Now, you can buy any 32-gallon can to do this with. It's really not important that you buy any particular type of can. So that's it. That's all we need to do with our drill for now is, again, to kind of ventilate this can. So now we've solved one of the biggest problems that we talked about in the beginning while we had to make these modifications. We've got 1, a way for our organisms in our soil to get into the can. 2, we've got airflow. And 3, we've got exhaust so that the air will continue to flow throughout the system. What we really need to do now, though, is kind of intensify this airflow, and that's what we'll show you in the next phase. Okay, so I bet you've already figured out what we're going to do with our pipe. Again, this was 10 feet long before I cut some sections off it already. We're going to need to cut it a little bit more to use it again. And what we're going to want to do is make this the centerpiece that allows ventilation, kind of a turbocharged level of ventilation throughout our composting system. The key is we're going to need to cut it, we need to cut it to the right length. Now, when I first thought about putting this system together, I thought about actually cutting a hole in the lid and allowing this pipe to extend up through it, and I realized there was a couple problems with that. One, it was going to let an awful lot of water in when it rained and maybe over-wet my compost. Two, it wouldn't look nice and clean and neat. Basically, this system's going to look like 3 garbage cans just set wherever you put it when it's done, so it would ruin that look to it. And 3, I would have to cut another hole, and I really didn't need to. I was going to basically make the system less effective by doing more work. So what I decided to do was cut this a little bit lower than the top. So what we need to do is get a measurement. Now, I could tell you to just mark it and cut it lower, and that would work, but I want to teach you how to get a measurement of the inside of a container while I'm doing this. So the way you do that is pretty simple. You get your tape measure, and then you put any kind of a straight item across. I actually used the small piece of pipe before I cut it. Now I'm using a piece of fencing material. Measure directly to the bottom, and then just look here. And I'll put a picture in place for you so you don't even have to worry about seeing exactly where it is. But I believe it's about 28 inches. So 28 inches high. What that means is I'm going to go ahead and cut my stock to about 26 inches and give myself about 2 inches below the top of the lid. So to do that, pretty simple. And the reason I like these 10-foot sticks is I have plenty of extra, so I can, if you'll notice, the perforations do not extend all the way to the bottom. So I'm going to use that as my waste side. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to measure and mark 26 inches. Now this is partly why this is a good first project for a lot of people. If that's 26.5 inches, no big deal. If it's 25.75 inches, no big deal. Honestly, if it's 27 inches, it's no big deal. I just need to mark roughly about that area. And what we're going to do next is show you how you cut this pipe. So I've got my mark made. I'm ready to go ahead and cut. This is where I'm going to use my hacksaw. Now, one of the reasons I chose this material for building this system is it's very easy to cut because, again, it's not really as hard as regular PVC. It's more like a rubber underneath it. And 2, it's already cut. So to cut, it's pretty simple. You probably didn't need to even include this, but I just wanted to make a point of how easy this is to cut. And there we go. We've got our 26-inch piece of stock, and we're going to make one more modification on it before we go ahead and install it into our system. Okay, one thing you'll notice about this drainage pipe is it's got your 5/8" holes on one side. The other side, it doesn't have holes. Now, to get maximum ventilation, we want to go ahead and use our 7/8" hole saw to make holes in this side. And it doesn't really matter where they are. They don't have to be perfectly on the other side. They don't have to be perfectly in alignment. There's no measurements to make, except one measurement. What I want to make sure is that when I insert this piece of pipe in the hole in the bottom of this bin, that I'm going to be able to insert it into one of the holes I've made. Now, you'll notice the holes that are in here are 5/8", so this pipe won't fit in there. But the 7/8" hole saw is going to allow us to actually insert this pipe into the bottom of the stock. Now, this is really simple to do. You can do it completely by eye. Just take whichever side is more level, whichever one you're going to use as your bottom, set it into your pipe, insert your pipe into the hole, set your pipe basically level, and we'll show you a picture so you can see the inside. But basically all you're going to do is go down in here and mark the top of your pipe with a little red mark. Now what that means is I need to have a hole where the top edge of the hole is right at the bottom of that line. Again, this is not a precision measurement. It's not that important, but we do want to make sure that the pipe is going to be able to line up there. Now I've actually probably need to pull that line over a little bit. So we'll go ahead and we'll make our line of holes right up here. You don't need to make this mark. I'm just doing that for you guys so you can see what's going on. That way I've got holes on one side, holes directly on the opposite side. So the next thing we're going to do is make some holes in this pipe. Okay, so we've got our 7/8" hole saw again. We're going to go through here. And the only one I really need to point out, again, is that I made that hole so that the top edge of that hole was right where the bottom or the top part of that secondary pipe came in. And now all I need to do is make a series of these. This stuff does kind of make a mess. Yeah. Again, one thing that'll help you clean it up is to have that extra lid laying there on the ground to throw all your pieces in. So now we've got our pipe ready to go. This is the bottom side. You may want to mark that a little bit more than that. Maybe put a B on it. It's up to you what you want to do. But all I really want you to understand that we've done here is we've made sure that we have an awful lot of ability for air to get access to the center of our compost as it's heating up. The next thing we need to do is pretty simple. We need to make sure that when this pipe is inserted inside the bin and it's up against the side, it still gets good airflow. So we're going to need to make another mark using our Sharpie, or whatever you're using to mark, and simply go in through your hole and then mark your pipe that comes in from the side so that you know that that is the piece that we need to put some holes in. And I'll show you how to do that in just a second. So again, now what we need to do is we need to make sure that as this gets butted up against the other side of the pipe, there's still plenty of airflow to get up through the center of our system. So we've gone ahead and put our standard drill bit in here. Again, I've got a 5/16. Anything that's of reasonable size when you're drilling a 1/2-inch pipe will work though. And all you'll need to do is drill about, I'd say about 5 holes on each side and drill them straight through. Now when you're going to drill in 1/2-inch PVC pipe, it's curved. So you don't want to start your drill until you get your drill set on the pipe, put a little bit of weight on it, turn it slowly. It'll start to cut a hole. It'll go right through and then drill straight through the pipe. So having an edge like I do here that overhangs so you're not drilling into the deck will be helpful. No, missed that one. And again, this is another thing. It doesn't need to be measured. I'm probably drilling 1 hole every 1/2 inch here. So I'm ending up with 5 holes there. And I'll turn it a quarter turn or 90 degrees. And I'll drill again the same way. Again, there's no artwork to this. All we're looking to do is make sure we're going to get good airflow when everything comes out the side. The next thing we'll do is show you how to put it all together. Alright, so as long as this video is, this is how simple things really are. We're going to take our piece of pipe that's already been drilled. We're going to come in from one of the holes from the side. Which one doesn't really matter as long as they're all relatively the same length. Take our end of our pipe that's got our perforations in it. We're going to go in one of these side holes. We're going to fit it into the pipe in the center. And that's it. And we'll probably trim that off, this piece down here, so that it's not too long. You guys don't need to watch me cut a piece of 1/2-inch PVC pipe. I've got the pipe in the center, basically dead center in the can. And what we'll do is, and I know what you're thinking, you're wondering, why don't we do anything to like permanently attach that pipe to this pipe? Well, it's going to sit there just fine on its own. As you fill it in with compost, it's going to become more and more stable. And when it's time to go to the, to start actually turning your compost over, instead of having to deal with getting this out, simply reach down, pull your piece out of the side, pull your piece out of the center, take your compost bin and dump it into your next compost bin. So with the lids on them, the only thing that really shows up is your little pipe sticking out the bottom. You can turn that to the rear. You end up with your 3-part system wherever it is on your homestead. Everything looks like nice and neat. Everything's contained. Everything's easy to mix together. And we'll put one little piece here at the end of this video where I'll talk to you about how to speed up your composting and how to get great results. And one little trick you can do to make sure if you think you need a 4-part system, you probably don't. So let's talk about a few things you can do to get the most out of your new composting system. Number one, what you really want to do is, if this is your system, you want to go ahead and fill it about 3/4 of the way. Once it's full about 3/4 of the way, start working on your second barrel. And by the time you're 3/4 of the way full, take your 3rd barrel, go ahead and do a dump into your 2nd barrel. And there's no hard, fast rules about this. Honestly, you could probably do a dump every 2 weeks, and that'll accelerate your composting. Since you have 3, you'll be able to do that very well. Now, Eventually, what you may want to do is you might start out with a level this high, and as it breaks down over a few weeks, you might end up with half the volume. It's okay to go ahead and start combining your material at that point. So take 2 and combine them into 1. Now, what if you have all 3 full, and you're thinking maybe I need to add a 4th? You probably don't in most situations unless you're producing an awful lot of waste. What you want to do is get yourself a 4th garbage can, but keep it and use it as a garbage can. Just pull it aside, take the garbage bag out of it once in a while, and only use it so that we take our container A, let's say, dump it into our fresh garbage can, dump it straight back into A. That'll give it a turnover. Or if B needs to be going into A, dump A into your fresh garbage can, dump B into A, dump C into B, and then dump the stuff in your garbage can into C, and then don't put holes in that, because obviously once we've done these modifications, it's not really very good as a garbage can anymore. Last but not least, make sure you're putting a variety of materials into your garbage can. A lot of people think, well, I cut my grass every week, so I'll put my grass clippings in there. Really not a good idea to put your grass clippings in there every week. You probably want to stockpile them somewhere else, and add them maybe a gallon or 2 of them at a time so that they're mixed in with other things. What happens with grass clippings and leaves especially, if they're in there by themselves, they pack together, and even with all these modifications, you don't get a good airflow. So mixing as many things together as possible is a great way to improve your overall breakdown time and get things to break down faster. The next thing is kind of kickstart your compost, and the easy way to do that, add a little bit of completely composted compost. Even if you're just starting out, get some from the store that comes in a bag, add that to your compost bin. About a gallon will do that for you. What that's going to do is all the organisms and bacteria and things that help make this process work, they're in that compost, and by putting in there, you're kind of seeding them, and that'll speed things up. And last but not least, add some manure to your compost. Get a hold of some cow manure or some chicken manure or some hog manure or rabbit manure, whatever you have. Put that in there, and that'll help kickstart that process and add more variety to your compost. Best compost you can make is made up from a whole bunch of different things. It's really not a good idea to make compost out of just straw or out of just oak leaves. It's not that you can't do it, but it has a very uniform nutrient profile. The more various sources that you use when you put compost together, the better end product you're going to get. And last but not least, my big tip for you is right here. It's coffee. Not just your own coffee grinds. Go by a Starbucks or any other coffee house and ask them if you can have their spent coffee grinds. Most places will be glad to give them to you. Add that to your composting. It adds another piece of organic matter. It'll accelerate things. And last but not least, if you want to get things going off really fast, go ahead and fill one of these bins in about a week. And you say, oh, I don't produce enough waste to fill one in about a week. Go by your local grocery store, ask them if you can have the produce they're throwing away for composting. Most will be happy to give them to you. You'll be easily able to fill up one of these in a single week, and with that you'll be able to get your composting going very quickly, and hopefully the wind didn't ruin the very end, because that's where we're at now. Now it's time for you to go put that system together.